We were trained to work out, but what about working in? Whether the topics are mental health, meditation, spirituality, holistic medicine, or sexuality, host Josh Bieneman and guests have real conversations about balance and personal growth within the sports community. This is Locker Room Alchemy.
What's going on? I'm Josh Bieneman, and welcome back to Locker Room Alchemy. This is episode number 4, and this is the first episode after the initial launch, I guess, and putting out the first 3 episodes. And to everybody, friends, family, or people that I've never met in my life that reached out, I want to say, first off, thank you so much. It was a very vulnerable experience. It's kind of like getting butt naked and just saying, here I am, everybody. What do you think? So much appreciation to anybody that checked out any of those 3 talks. This episode is with Brooke Schroeder, and Brooke is a school psychologist at the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and is also my ex-girlfriend. And this is wife approved. And my wife Heather actually had the idea, which I thought was pretty cool, because I was talking to her about trying to have a feminine aspect, or the next episode or one of the coming episodes have a feminine aspect of mental health and mental illness within the sports community, especially because we were coming off of 3 testosterone-driven guys in episode 3. I thought it was such a no-brainer to have Brooke on for 2 reasons. One is that she's probably the toughest person I know personally surrounding mental illness. She's a freaking warrior, and she's humble as hell, but she's probably the most resilient person I've ever been around when it comes to this stuff. And second is because she helped me in one of my darkest hours when I was kind of coming out the other end and realizing that I wasn't okay and I needed help. And she was one of the people that I felt comfortable enough to reach out to, and she gave me a hand. So I hope she can maybe inspire somebody else as well. So this is episode number 4 with Brooke Schroeder, psychologist, on bipolar disorder, OCD, cognitive restructuring, and healing. All right, Brooke, what is happening?
Hello.
This is a surreal moment for me. I know we're just catching up before we start this recording and talking about the serendipities that led up to this moment, and you were one of the key people, whether you knew it or not, that gave me some really good advice. So I really appreciate you coming full circle and now talking about it.
Of course.
If you can give everybody a little bit of background on yourself, as much of a personal background with your story with mental illness or your profession, and your unique perspective when it comes to mental health.
Well, my name is Brooke, like Josh just said. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder shortly after high school. The problems actually started way before that. They were very mild, so you really couldn't pinpoint anything, just some, blitz of depression really here and there. But then when I got into high school, and particularly my senior year, I struggled. I went through a very, very deep depression. And what happened essentially was I had basketball was my love, as far as sports go. That was kind of my dream. I ended up having to quit the basketball team my senior year because the medications they were trying with me made me either really, really sick or really dizzy, or just certain things. I ended up dropping a ton of weight, not on purpose. I could literally run down and up and down the basketball court a couple of times and I'd have to be taken out. To the point to where other coaches on other teams would talk to my coach afterwards and be like, what's going on with her? Why is she not playing? So it was very public, which is really difficult. Especially high school itself can be difficult when you add that on top of it. It was difficult. And then I was in all honors classes, and I was actually number 1 in my class going into my senior year. I had to quit all my classes but the one I needed to graduate. Because I was having problems just kind of formulating thoughts, having racing thoughts. I just really could not perform academically at all. So that's kind of what started the ball for that. And then I ended up going to college at Bowling Green. kind of followed my sister there. And then that's when I had my first manic episode. So I had delusions. So essentially I was like, okay, I believed that the stars were a map, like showing me where I needed to go to do some particular thing. I believed that people were chasing me all the time. So when I drove erratically and would like drive, like zigzagging between roads and certain things like that, because I thought people were chasing me. It was a paranoid delusion. So what ended up happening is in the middle of the semester at BG, I was withdrawn. My parents and I knew that there was something kind of going on. And up until that point, we had been seeing a lot of doctors and we just couldn't quite figure out what the issue was, especially because of my age. So they ended up pulling me out, and we had been trying different medications, like I said, at that time. And then eventually it kind of got to the point where this isn't working. We need something needs to happen now because it's getting worse. So I ended up getting hospitalized for, I can't even remember because it was so long ago, maybe like a month or two, just to get my medication squared away, because up until that point we hadn't done that, and that needed to happen. And I'll say that was the best thing that ever happened to me, which sounds crazy to say the least, but doing that, I was able to focus on just that piece of me figuring out the mental health, whereas I wasn't out in the world trying to navigate working or being social or being with my family. I was able to just be there in a safe space while we tried different medications and my body adjusted to it. And I was able to just focus on that. So that's kind of how my background in terms of the bipolar disorder. And that was when I was 17, 18. I'm now 34, so it's been 17, 18 years. So it's been a long time. And that kind of led me into the field career-wise for me. I'm a school psychologist. So in Cleveland, down in the trenches, I do a lot with special education students. So I do a lot of testing for special education. I also do crisis work. So if there's a student feeling like they're going to hurt themselves, I would handle that in the school setting. I also help if we're having some difficulties with certain students with behavior and academics. I'm on the team that helps come up with interventions that we can try to help the student be more successful. And that's kind of, I guess, my story is how I got here and where my expertise comes from.
Cool. So let's go back to small town USA at 17, 18. And for the people listening that don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you grew your entire childhood was in Shelby, or at least the teenage years? Okay. So Shelby, Ohio, which is, you can explain, but it's a very small town. And when I say you grew up on a farm, you literally grew up on a farm. So if you can talk a little bit about your experience of, I guess, being in a small town where everyone knows everything, and anything that's a little peculiar that someone's going to, especially like a star athlete and a very successful student that probably has a spotlight on them in that town, how that was, I guess, discovering that something wasn't right. And then also what you've seen through working with kids in the inner city. And I know you work with special eds kids in the inner city, but if you've seen any kids that also struggle with that culture, you know what I mean? Because I think they're two different things, and there's some human elements in both, but I imagine that those two, the urban and the rural, are a little bit different.
I definitely think being in the spotlight was very, very hard. And I think that's kind of where my breaking point came, all that pressure to be, like you said, that in basketball anyway, which is my thing, to be that star athlete. And then, to also show, hey, I'm not only an athlete, I'm taking my academics seriously. And then I think another part that's on that is you become a role model. That means you're also a role model. And I think in school at that time, I also had a lot of good morals too. So that was on another layer on top of it. And I think at some point, sometimes the pressure just kind of, it was going to happen. You have to have the gene pool. Thinking back, there's so many instances. I can tell you instances from first grade that I could have told you, I could see this coming. So it was one of those things that was going to happen, but that's just when the dam broke, essentially. So yeah, it was very, very hard.
If you don't mind me asking, and we'll get back to that, because I feel like we all, in mental health, we always go to like the collapse, you know what I mean? And we don't talk enough about like the little subtle signs along the way. What were those when you're early on?
Early on, I can remember all I could ever explain to my mom, I'd be like, Mom, I feel really, really weird. I can't explain this. I don't feel right. Like as a child, you can't say, you can't really communicate it. But I can remember that. And then one that sticks in my head like, so vividly, and I don't know why this is. In sixth grade, I was Halloween, and I wanted to be a cave woman. Back then, I was all like, yeah, femininity kind of thing. And so my mom let me, but I couldn't understand. I felt I was so down and so depressed. I couldn't understand. I knew that I got what I had wanted, so I should have been feeling happy, but I felt like I was dying inside. So I was able to notice there was a discrepancy between like how I should feel and the way I was feeling. Mm. So it was, I just remember like wanting to go trick or treating, just feeling like putting one foot in front of the other was so difficult.
Almost like the wires started, there was like a glitch, you know what I mean?
Sort.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of like that. And then I'm trying to think, I went through a little depression in middle school, but it wasn't major. Nothing too big there. And then I remember like not my senior year, but a couple years before that, I was in honors English class and I was writing an essay and I literally stopped and I looked at my teacher and I said, I can't think. I can't write anything. I literally couldn't write at all. Like it was the weirdest, strangest thing. And I remember her calling my mom in and like they talked about it. And I think she gave me, whatever on it because I usually did super well on those things anyway. But I physically couldn't mentally could not put sentences together. Mm. So just like little things. Right. I don't know if those make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, back to Shelby and the star basketball player and I guess starting to realize things aren't normal.
Yeah, and that was really like being again that spotlight. I remember taking my lunch and eating in the room or in the locker room because I didn't want to be around people. I wasn't in my classes. I literally sat in like the principal's conference room or the library all day. That was really hard. I think friendships then were extremely, extremely tough. I thought people that would be there were not there, and that was a major shock. And then oddly, on the same token, some people that I wouldn't have thought were there suddenly appeared. So it was really, really tough. I mean, now that I'm looking back, I do have a hard time still with some people that weren't there, but also looking back saying, I could barely explain this even when I was in high school. So how could I expect another high school student to be able to understand that?
Yeah. Do you feel like there's like, we're almost in like this tribe, like this crazy little tribe, like a little community, you know what I mean? Where you can only explain it and have the real empathy if you've lived it a little bit, you know what I mean? Like I even remember like when we were dating, like you explaining it to me at that point, like when you're talking about like the little instances, like I had those things where I was like, oh, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean? Like I had a couple of days where I just didn't feel right. But besides that, I would snap out of it and go back to normal. But I remember you trying to explain it to me. And now that I've realized that I'm kind of, had similar things in my own life and probably similar chemical imbalances or whatnot. Does it feel like you're a part of a community now? You know what I mean? And that like you can help people and that people that go through it can probably, I guess, relate the most?
Yeah, you are kind of part of the community, and the way that I'm using that gift, as you could say,
right, yeah,
is doing the career I have, because when students do come to me about this, I can be like, look, I'm not just saying this stuff, I actually lived it, and that makes it a whole kind of different ballgame. Like this year was the first time I'd actually talked about it in public. I had a trauma group, 8th grade group that we were talking to, and they wanted to know more about bipolar disorder. And that's the first time I actually, like, I've talked to people, obviously, people I dated, all that know, but I've never like talked in like a public setting. But I did that this year, and it was awesome to be able to kind of share that with them and kind of give them different examples of what to do if they need help. So,
how is that received in In those different communities, now you work with all of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, or is it strictly the city of Cleveland?
It's Cleveland Metropolitan School District, but I am with my one building technically. So
Okay.
I don't work with like
Right.
network of buildings. I am my one building.
Now, working in like a dense city, metropolitan area, and coming up in Shelby, what are some of the differences you see like with the children, or just like the culture in general surrounding like mental health, or the idea of like bipolar? Like you opening up about people, that word gives some people the heebie-jeebies. You know what I mean? And they just don't want to talk about it. How do you see that accepted in those different communities?
I'd say, like, when I think about that, I just, in my head, screaming resources, resources, resources. Like, I grew up in a white middle-class community. My parents had one monetary resources. They would take me to see this one guy to Columbus every week, and that was like $200 to see him. And we did that for months and months upon end. So, like, you see just the monetary differences, and like to be able to get resources. Because, you know, the kind of, if you have more money, you have access to better care. And that's just the way it is. And in Cleveland being low SDS population, you know, you see that there's a difference there in terms of kind of the quality and things you get just because of money alone. Mm-hmm. And then you also see a lot like with family structure. My parents have been together, you know, since they were in their 20s. I have a great family resources. And sometimes with Cleveland, there's one single parent home. So they might not be able to get these kids to these doctor's appointments. Again, they might not be able to afford it. They may have other kids that they need to worry about. So there's a huge difference in between like white middle class getting the resources and then just like the city kids getting the resources.
Who's responsible for that problem? I guess not in a blame way, but in a sense of like, yeah, that's a pretty unfair imbalance. You know what I mean? It's a version of reality. You know what I mean? And to just turn a blind eye to that, or to have one segment of the population be able to heal their version of reality, and then another segment be trapped. Who can help with that?
It's so hard because it's such a systemic problem. It's not just, you know, little problem or just in Cleveland or anything like that. It is a huge problem. And I don't know as far as like where the blame goes, but it's just, we need to have access to better care. You know, we need to have access to, maybe transportation is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. Like even getting kids to school in the inner city, transportation can be tough, and not everybody has cars. If they do, one family might have one car, and that's needed for whoever the primary breadwinner is. Like that's a huge problem. Just getting these basic things are what's holding people back. And it's like, it's not fair. It just isn't fair. There is a disparity. There's no question.
Now with the kids, I guess let's go to the inner city. And do you see a lot of openness when it comes to disclosing mental health issues? And if so, is there an imbalance in the male and the feminine?
I'm trying to think between the kids. Well, in general, like men versus women, this is not necessarily with kids, but in general, women are going to be more likely to seek help. That's just over generally what kind of happens.
What since you have the knowledge in your brain, I mean, you've done the real life studies and the academic studies. What percentage or what disparity would that be, you think? Is it like 2-to-1, 3-to-1 generally?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm just speaking like early, kind of from experience. I kind of mixed my background with like just in my experience. So
gotcha.
But yeah, women generally are. That's just kind of what the stat is. And then if you look like European American, you know, Caucasian, whatever, they're more likely to seek treatment in general. And then they're more likely to see medications like as a necessary thing and like a first line treatment. So that's like European Americans. Then you look at like African Americans, and they have more negative attitudes towards healthcare. And they're typically they don't want to be so focused on the medicine. They'd rather seek maybe like other treatments. So like maybe medicine wouldn't be a first line treatment. And then it's also seen, I think, more of like as a weakness that they can overcome themselves. You know, I think the African American community is facing so many other challenges like racism, that they kind of try to like, I'm going to bring myself up by the bootstraps. I don't want any help. I can conquer this myself. And I think that translates into the mental health piece of it as well, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, almost, man. Yeah, exactly. That, and which I would consider like a masculine component. You know what I mean? Of like, don't be. Yeah, my biological father passed away right before this coronavirus stuff hit. And it was right at the tip of New York City. I think they had like 12 cases, and I was up there and visiting him in the hospital. And it was the first time that that was actually the second time I've ever seen him, but I've known the family for about 3 or 4 years. But it was the first time I had heard that he had basically depression since like 17, 18 years old. But within the Hispanic community, especially in New York City, there's so much shit going on. You know what I mean? That to be able to hit the pause button and go talk to somebody about your problems, you know what I mean? It just wasn't acceptable. Just from, the grind of life. I mean, you had to get back on. So what they would do is almost kind of like, if he was having a bad episode, they would almost kind of like help hide him. So no one would see. So he would be sick for about a month. And then once he kind of was able to get his head back together, he wasn't sick. And then he went back out. But no one really asked too many questions after that. And within the Hispanic community, it was kind of like agreed that like, yeah, we'll cover up some stuff, because if it does come out that someone has anxiety or depression, it all kind of gets dropped in this crazy bucket. You're just fucking crazy. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how it happened, trauma, chemical imbalance. You're just crazy now, and you can't get out of it. So it's that's the masculine component that I saw that I think is really difficult, especially with like you were talking about, single parent households where you just don't have the time. Where's the starting point with that? If now we're in quarantine or coming out of quarantine now, but in those big cities where there's so much going on, and if you take a misstep, you're screwed in some cases. How do you find the time to actually learn more about this or explore yourself?
The first thing that comes to mind really is prioritizing. Like, you have to make it a priority. Like, this is not something that's going to go away on its own. It's not like you can go get a treatment. You have to make it a priority. That's basically what it is. And that's kind of what happened to me. Eventually stuff just wasn't working out and we couldn't figure it out. So that we had to suddenly just go, okay, look, this medicine piece is the main priority. You got to not worry about everything else. We've got to get your medication straight. And like I said, that was the biggest thing for me. And I was, luckily, because I was over 18 at that time, like, I went with them. My biggest thing is, if I talk to parents, is like, they're underage, you have authority over them, do it now. Because they can't say, no, I'm not going to, no, I'm not going to do this. Do it now. Because you still have the power to make them go to therapy, make them go see the doctors, those kinds of things. Take advantage of it while you can. Because once they turn 18, there's nothing you can do. Yeah.
And then after that, do you see in most cases there has to be a rock bottom situation? I guess once they're independent, for them to seek help?
Not even that sometimes. Sometimes people just don't accept it in general.
Yeah.
If they don't accept it, then you're going to keep hitting rock bottom, or you're going to keep fluctuating.
Yeah.
So even then,
All right, when it comes to the healing side, that's just human stuff, right? So what are some of the healing components at younger ages, and not necessarily that like 13-year-olds are listening to this and trying to get some coping mechanisms, but that we can learn that are non-invasive and not like a doctor's order, you know what I mean? What are some of the ways that there can be some healing along the way for younger people, whether it be breathing techniques or even meditation or stuff like that?
There's actually a couple of different ways to answer this question. So I'm going to answer it kind of clinical on one side, and then sort of not as clinical, but personal.
Cool.
Like I said, like, the first thing The hardest thing is acceptance. A lot of people get stopped at that, and that's why they can't make progress. The acceptance piece, because of the stigma that we know relates to mental illness. But just as when I went through that, I remember like just, you know, having all in my mind, everything taken away, the sports, the academics. Just, I remember at one point I couldn't pack a bag for sports. Like I couldn't get my thoughts enough to pack a bag. Like I would cry because I couldn't do it. So like you get this acceptance, and then I remember going through my head, like, am I going to get a job? Am I going to be a productive member of society? Is anybody going to want to marry me? You know, how would they think of me as a wife? How would I be with children? Should I have them because that could mess up my medication? Or, you know, how would I afterwards? Would I be more open or for like postpartum depression or something like that? So it's kind of from that feminine aspect, you're kind of like, you know, wow, like, am I going to be able to do all of these things? Has that been taken away as well? So that's kind of something that, those are the things that kind of went through my mind when all this kind of started.
What gave you the footing to find acceptance?
It might have been religion. My parents were just, I always kind of, I knew I didn't fight it for some reason. Most people, I don't know why I didn't. I just, you know, on an intellectual level, that I needed help. And I'm one of those people that said, tell me what it is so I can fix it.
Yeah. Like
that was kind of more of my mindset. Then, and again, like with those resources, my parents' resources, it just was obviously if something's wrong. Like if I can't think to write sentences, if I can't pack a bag, if I can't get up out of my bed, like there's obviously something wrong here. And again, my parents were huge. Now, if they would have not taken me to treatment or said, oh, you know, you're lazy, this, that, and the other, I wouldn't have responded the way I did. But I think because of how they responded, it was okay for me to say, you know, something's wrong.
With the religion side, what was it that I guess gave you a little bit of a, I don't want to say a crutch, because I think religion can be a lot more than that, but something to actually wrap your arms around, you know what I mean, during that time that could give you something real, you know what I mean, in a moment where like everything seems so screwed up, you know what I mean, because I remember that was the toughest thing for me when things were going crazy. Like I didn't know what to trust. I didn't know what source to go to. Should I listen to the doctors or should I listen to the healers? You know what I mean? So what for you, or what for religion about religion allowed you to kind of wrap your arms around it?
I'm not sure. I think what's funny is like I could counteract this statement later, but I think part of it because I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I think having suicidal thoughts is part of all mental health. I'd be lying if I said
the actual like life, death, like that. You have to pull that side.
It's kind of like I know my family would need me, or I couldn't do this sort of because I need to be stronger. I'm not real. I don't know what it was, but I remember just being like, I feel like they need me. Like, I don't know. So that was kind of that first. I ended up losing that along the way, and I'll kind of tell you about it in a second. But like, I also think it's important to understand, like, kind of like we're talking, healing happens in stages. And I don't know, have you heard of Maslow's theory, hierarchy of needs before?
I have, yep.
And that's honestly, I don't know if it happens for everyone, that's really what it was for me. Like, I know it's been, like I said, 17, 18 years.
Could you get into that? Could you get into just a quick snapshot of that?
Sure. Yeah, it took me years to get where I am. And the first one is like physiological. So the first thing you need to meet is those things. So it's like sleep, shelter, air, food, water. I remember when I first got diagnosed, I didn't do anything. I didn't enroll in community college for like that whole semester because honestly, that's all I could do. Survival at that point was my goal. Like my goals for that day could have been getting up and doing one chore. And that would have been an appropriate functional goal for me at that time. Like that's how basic it was. Because when you're coming off of not having the right mix of chemicals in your brain for 17 years, it's going to take a long time for your medicines to get in and try to get stuff caught up. Like it just wears you out to a point where you just can barely function at all. You're like you haven't slept in 17 years, and then all of a sudden you get the best sleep of your life, and then like after that you're just like, I can barely move. So that was huge, and that played a big part of my life, like doing that. And then the next one is like safety. So that could be like personal security, health, employment. I also think of this as, for me, academic. This is kind of be where I put myself at, because when I did my first semester back or whatever, I literally took one class. Like some people that might be fine. Like I wasn't working, I wasn't doing anything. The only thing I did was responsible for that one class. So it really took a lot of stages. And then after that, I went to Ashland there. And my biggest thing there was, again, the academic piece. Focusing on not necessarily having fun in college like most other people do, or, building relationships, those things. For me, it was still, I was still in that physiological, like safety, academic kind of phase. And then like later on, the love, like more friends and love kind of ended up being something I worked on. And I'm still kind of working on that phase today. I'd say still I'm kind of in that phase. And then comes self-esteem. Like I remember I had to be extremely, extremely disciplined. Like I think about how disciplined you are with baseball. I know how baseball is your love, and coaching and directing and doing everything you're doing. You have to be just as disciplined. Like I was in college and I knew I had to have a regular sleeping schedule. I could not stay up till 3 a.m. on the weekends. I couldn't party all the time, because I knew I had to be disciplined enough to have a regular sleep schedule if I wanted to make sure I was stable. So that was huge. And then you also go to like the partying part in college. Well, I didn't really party because I knew the effects of my medications. They were newer at that time. So I knew I couldn't do that. I had to be responsible enough to say, okay, I can't do this. This could have an implication on my medications, which will impact my stability. So you learn that you have to be extremely, extremely disciplined when this happens, because it's just like a sport. If you're not disciplined, you're going to lose it. And that means taking your medications. That was me making sure I didn't miss any therapy appointments. So a lot of my college life was, again, that safety, that physiological phase. I didn't get to do as much of the love and belonging, friendship, networking phase.
Did you go through a period of like, this is bullshit? You know what I mean? Like, this is fucked up, that why, like, clearly, like, I played basketball against you. I wasn't very good at basketball, but you could have played at a high level, like, I'm sure you were on your way to playing Division I basketball and this and that and all these scholarships. And now it's not that life was taken away. Life is just different. You know what I mean? Now you're in college and you're kind of just a student. You know what I mean? Did you go through a period of like, what the fuck happened?
Oh yeah, all the time. In all honesty, I do that sometimes still. I'll be like, why? Like, I do think of it a lot, like in the way you said it, a lot was taken away. That's kind of how I do. I do kind of look at it that way sometimes. And a lot of it was, why me? Why this? And again, like, I'm human. I still think that way sometimes. When I'm having a hard day or a rough week or whatever, I still am kind of like, oh my gosh, why? Mm-hmm. I think you're going to get that from time to time. But yeah, I was angry, so angry, because it seemed like there was like everything I had worked so hard for during senior year of high school just took it away, and then have, lifelong implications. So yeah, I was really angry, and I still get that way sometimes.
What was the turning point where you were able to like turn it into a discipline, where you're able to take, like you were talking about, basketball and say, okay, I'm regimented and this is my routine and my one path, and then everything gets fucked up, and then you got to get all the pieces back together and then organize it to now work on healing yourself. You know what I mean? What was it just family support, insulation, just everything that allowed you to kind of like refocus the energy?
I think I'm an extremely driven person. So like, and I just I don't. Yeah, yes. That's a good way to say it.
Who were you competing against?
My disorder and myself. Like, I wanted to prove, like, I could have done anything. If I wouldn't have been like a doctor or something, I could have. But I wanted to prove to myself, like, I can still do this, and I still deserve a good life, mm-hmm. even if that may be flawed, as some people may consider it. I knew it was going to be hard ass work, and it's worked every single day. Just like when you're in a sport that you love, almost more so than a sport that you love, like with like baseball for you, it is something you have to do every day. It's just something I know I have to do in order to put one foot in front of the other. I know if I slip up or whatever, go into a funk, like that can happen really quickly. So you have got to stay on top of it. You have to be able to reset.
And with that, because I can only imagine, I mean, just knowing a little bit about your story, but I've kind of gone through those battles where you feel like you take one step forward and then all of a sudden you screw up and you take two steps back. You know what I mean? And then it's just the ultimate judgment, and then you're already in an odd place, and then you just start to pour it on and pour it on and pour it on. What helped you through the judgment periods? And I'm sure it still happens a lot.
I know I just talked about hitting the reset button is big for me, and I don't know where I got this. Like if I'm slipping into like sleeping or not wanting to get out of bed, like I remember in my head, like, okay, you got to break this routine. You got to break this cycle. The sooner you break the cycle, the sooner you'll be back to normal. And it's understanding that I can make that reset. So like before, it would take me longer to reset. You know, it could take weeks or months to do a reset. Now I kind of gather myself, and I'm kind of like, okay, so you had a bad couple of days. I also have, I don't know if I ever told you this, like an obsessive compulsive like eating disorder that goes with.
Oh, no, I didn't.
It's literally like I'll get so anxious, I'll go buy like 5 Happy Meals and literally eat all of them, like it's a compulsion kind of thing. Like I'll be like, okay, you did bad today, but it's okay. Tomorrow is a new day. You can start over. And actually being able to like internalize that and believe that helps. Because like you said, you can get judgmental, like I shouldn't have done this, or why did I say that? I only said that because I was anxious, or I only did this because, you know, stress, and people don't realize it's coming from a different place.
Yeah.
Just that being able to, that really, just kind of doing that, or doing something I love that brings me joy, like hanging out with my nieces and nephews, somewhere where I could just pour the love on and I get it love back, and that's just kind of, it just touches me to my soul and makes me think like, okay, I'm here for a reason, you know?
Yeah. Since you brought the reset up, I remember one time, and I don't even know if you know that I remember, but I just remember you being very anxious, and I knew very little about anxiety or anything. Like, I just remember, like, I knew something was wrong. And we were at your apartment. I just remember saying, like, yep, you got to get the fuck out. Like, I'm probably going to need like 3 or 4 days, get your shit, get out. And it was very just like matter of fact. And for me, that's the way I work. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll just get out. You know what I mean? So at that point, and I don't know, what were we, 23, 24, 25? It seemed like you were self-aware enough to know that, like, yep, here we go. You know what I mean? You had a plan in place. So what were those things during that 2 or 3 day period, or the reset that you did, if you don't mind personally telling?
Well, I think first, like the first part of that is like I noticed like the trigger symptoms. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like there's certain things I know, like I know I'm gonna have a tough day. As weird as this may sound, like if I'm in my car and I have to hit like all the different radio, you know, the radio buttons, like which station do I want? If I do that like 6 times in a row because I can't find something, I'm like, oh shit, today is gonna be a bad day. But I know it's gonna be like a rough day. So knowing and understanding like when your triggers are and what you do when you're triggered helps. Because I'll be like, oh, I know I've been triggered. Like I automatically do this sometimes. Like I do a lot of those like adult coloring books. When I pick one of those up and I'm like scribbling in it before I go to bed, I know that I'm getting anxious because I typically don't do that. So it's like makes me self-aware of like certain things. I'll be like, oh, I know. I can't remember obviously that particular thing that I did, but I do a lot of different things now. Like it's all really about distractions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like I know you kind of hinted before, like a lot of people, what do they do? They put the Band-Aid on. They go to the bar. They do the casual sex thing. Like we talked up previously about that. And what are those? Those are distractions.
Yeah.
You got to come up with your distractions. So if you're having just a rough day or whatever it is, having even like a 5-10 minutes where your brain cannot feel that can be huge.
As a does it matter? Well, I'm sure obviously it does matter, but can that be both numbing and bringing to the surface as a coping mechanism? You know what I mean? Are there healthy ways to numb that emotion as well as healthy ways to kind of explore that emotion?
I think, yeah. I mean, some simple things you can, like, I guess for numbing, that's kind of like,
that's what I think of, like the bar. You know what I mean? Where like, man, I fucking had a terrible week. What's wrong, dude? My girlfriend's being a bitch. You know, let's go to the bar. You know what I mean? Rather than, hey, dude, let's fucking not that I would probably call somebody out for being corny, but like, oh, let's sit down and talk about it. You know what I mean? But like, it's automatically, it seems like as guys, we're just like, oh, let's fucking go drink about it and let's just not talk about it. And we'll be fine tomorrow.
Yeah, numbing, I think, it doesn't sound as healthy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you can do it. Also, you can numb. I guess one way I numb is binge watching TV. I can tell I'm like trying to avoid things when I just like get home from work and I literally watch like 8 episodes of, I don't know, whatever it is I'm watching that day. But I guess for my distractions, like the typical stuff, like meditation is a good distraction for you. I don't do it as much as I should, but that's a good one. I know exercise is always a good one. I actually do a lot of like painting and puzzles. So when my brain's going every which way, if I can funnel that into like doing some kind of craft or doing some kind of puzzle, like then it's just finding like distraction ways where you can funnel that energy that you'd almost put into numbing and funnel it somewhere else. Journaling, if you want to get the emotions out positively or negatively, that's a good one. I like journaling. And like I said, that reset button is good. Sometimes when I think of like journaling too, or even like in my mind, I'll think of like a box. And this is kind of part of meditation. So I think of like something that's bothering me and I put it in the box and I put it to the side. Kind of like I put this bad thought into the side. So even if I'm, meditating for like 10 minutes, I'm not thinking about that. Like stop thinking about it. Put it in the box. It happens tomorrow. You can open the box again tomorrow. But for now, literally like mentally picturing that you're putting it in the box and you're putting it away. So like little things like that.
Where did you, did you just discover that or did you learn that somewhere?
Probably some of it's from therapy. Like cognitive restructuring is really important and I don't do enough of it. I have a book called Mind Over Mood that one of my therapists had. And I didn't do it a ton, but it was really eye-opening. It basically gives you a thought that's not true. Like, you could say, nobody likes me. Like, that could be your, like, inobtrusive bad thought or whatever. And so, like, what you do is you restructure it. So then you kind of put, like, oh, what's the likelihood of this being true? And then you kind of rephrase it and you say, well, that's not true. No, it's just not true that nobody likes me. You could think in your head, Josh likes me, my friend Treasure likes me. These people like me. So then you look at that and you're like, I guess that statement really isn't true. Mm-hmm. Now maybe I should structure it to say, you see what I'm saying? So with those kind of cognitive restructuring things are huge. Like if you want to, it's like, again, doing that discipline. Like there's a form in that book and it tells you how to do it and you kind of fill out. You just kind of, I remember doing it for like a week or two straight and being like, I would like write my phrases that are happening in my head and then I'd rewrite them to match what was actually true. So like any of those like cognitive restructuring things. And then the one about the box, are just some certain like meditations I've heard and things like that I've picked up along the way. Like, okay, put it in the box and put it to the side kind of thing.
One of the things that worked for me, and I didn't know there was a fancy word for it like that. But for me, and I just found through like meditation, and journaling was like, what if? And that was kind of like my little mantra, my little self get out of this trap was like, what if? And I started like playing around with it. And every day I would pick like, what if I didn't have a negative thought all day? And clearly like, that's pretty damn tough. You know what I mean? But like, I would just try to like, what if? You know what I mean? Just slowly kind of take down that judgment. Because when you first say it, you're like, there's fucking no way, that's impossible. And slowly just start to kind of just take the layers off and then do something else the next day. You know what I mean? What if this was whatever? And just kind of like trying to change my version of reality that day. And that helped me a lot to kind of almost like step outside my body a little bit. You know what I mean? Look at it from this angle and say, I'm just going to try looking at life from this angle today. And tomorrow I'm going to look at it from this angle. You know what I mean? Up, down. And that helped give me a lot of perspective. And helped me get out of this, just like this tunnel of this is all, you know what I mean? It's the same shit every day. So is that kind of what you're kind of talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. That, again, you said it, looking at it a different way, like challenging your unrealistic thoughts is really what it is. Nobody likes me, or I suck at my job. And then you sit there and think, well, what do you do good about your job? And then I'm like, oh, people say I'm good at this, that, and this, so I must not suck. You know, a lot of times I think people with mental illness have this like catastrophic like perspective. Like you always have catastrophic thinking, so you think the worst is going to happen. So like if I say my boss emailed me and would say, oh, call me tomorrow, like my brain could straight go to, oh my God, I did something wrong, they're going to fire me. Even though there's no basis for this, it's that catastrophic thinking that gets you in trouble, you know, and you kind of jump straight to that. You kind of got to, again, it's cognitive, like retraining your brain to not do these things that they used to do. And I don't do enough of it, like I said, but it takes a long time. It is, like I said, just like the baseball discipline to be as good as you were, to coach the kids that you have. It takes so much discipline. It's doable for sure. But yeah, the cognitive like behavioral stuff is really, really good for this.
No, with medication, I will touch on that because I do take medication as well. I've been taking it for 6-7 years. And I actually just tried to stop because I've been on this, like, just trying to kick every addiction. And it's been working really well. And the medication for me was like the last thing to kick. And I did it for like 3 or 4 days. And I was a dickhead. Like I was mean. I was really, really mean. So like, and I got to the point where I was like, maybe I need this. You know what I mean? Like maybe this is, you know what I mean? This isn't a problem. So, but I'm going to go to the doctor and figure out, like, can I start like weaning off of it? So with medication, I know it's not always the answer, but for people, especially like with opioid addiction or with the climate of opioid addiction, and now thinking like the man's trying to force feed them pills and all that shit, where do you see medication and how does someone find out if they really do need medication, you know what I mean? And find a doctor that they can trust to see that before they change the chemicals inside their body, you know, that's a big freaking deal. You know what I mean? So how do you find that out?
Well, first, I think you got to find a professional, like you said, you're comfortable with. It's not like you have to go this person and you're stuck with them. It's like anything else. You need to find somebody that fits you and that you trust. And that's not always the first person you go to. You go to multiple people, you know, before you actually do that. It's just being able to be open and honest with whoever your caregiver is. And then you also have to be open and honest for the medications. Like, for me, I'm a proponent of them, but obviously I could be extremely biased. Right. And what people don't understand is they think, here, you're going to get this medication, poof, it's done. Oh my God, it doesn't work like that. It is like mixing the perfect cocktail. You got to find the right medications at the right strengths mixed with other ones. It can take a long time. Like if we were working, mine was before I was hospitalized, 2 years trying to figure out what medications were going to fit me. And it was just really, really difficult trying to handle life and figure that out at the same time.
Did you go through a period of like, I don't want to stop like testing, like, you know what I mean? Did you feel like a guinea pig? Almost like they're just shoving like chemicals. Did you go through that period of like, maybe the medicine isn't working? Cause medicine worked for me instantly. Right. And I hear a lot of people that like, well, I tried this and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, fuck, maybe you just took the wrong thing. You know what I mean? So like if someone's going through that, like how did you continue to navigate when it wasn't clicking and not give up with it?
Honestly, I was like a ghost walking. Like, yeah, I was just kind of like dealing with, I don't know why, I just understood the process. I understood that it takes, you know, X amount of weeks to get in your system, then you have to have it in your system for how many weeks. And then if that doesn't work, it takes you X amount of days to get off. It is a lot of freaking determination and a hell of patience. Like, you have got to be patient. It's not for the weak, and it's not, you have to, I just knew that's what I had to do. Someone explained that to me. I said, okay, I understand that. And I could process the different side effects. And one thing that people are saying, they're like, oh, these side effects are terrible. But I'm like, look at the benefits. Like, if I didn't have this medication, I would probably be like locked up somewhere, and that would be my life. Like, hands down, I 100% believe that. You just have to understand. I don't know how else to say it, but I understand that it's going to take time. But I was lucky that I had my parents, though. It's not like I was trying to work a job and do this at the same time.
Yeah.
I wasn't. So I, again, kind of just lucked out and had all the support and stuff I needed. But
I mean, you do feel like a guinea pig. You really, really do. But I just knew that's the process. You have to understand where it's going. It's what you have to do to get where you're going. And I don't think a lot of people see the end. They can only see what's happening in the present. And that's kind of, I think a lot of people just don't wait long enough to do it.
Yeah.
They get those first side effects and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this. And it's only been 2 days in. Like, it's not going to work the way. It just doesn't.
Are there any other, I guess, strategies, or I know a lot of people use coping mechanisms. I always found that as kind of like, I'm broken, I need to fix something. I always just thought it as like drills. You know what I mean? I'm a baseball coach. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is a drill. Meditation is a drill. This is a drill. This is a drill. It's just another drill that I'm using for life. Was there anything else that you used other than the medication component that made a huge impact?
No, but I
fitness, just doubling down on what you were already good at, or
kind of just knowing when I needed more help.
Yeah.
And able to like take that next step. So like, I mean, for a while I saw like a therapist, and then I didn't. And then there was a time like, okay, this might be a good thing, to go again. I think being able to admit, like, when you're in a funk, or that you've been doing well, but then something happened and you need more assistance, is being able, like, to be honest with yourself and being like, oh, I need a little bit more help. I need to go reach out. That
so self-awareness,
yeah. I guess, would be like, don't be afraid. It's not, so you're not going to be a shiny all the time. You're going to have days, you're going to have things, and you're just, I don't know. And I think being honest and open with like family or like whoever you're like dating and stuff like that is just cathartic. Holding it all in is not a good thing.
And last thing,
remember what I told you.
I want to get in that. Let's get into that. Last thing is, how did you get comfortable doing that? I mean, it took me 33 years, and with my wife, just a lot of awkward moments where she knew something was not right, and like she's tried everything. You know what I mean? So How the hell were you so comfortable at 24? Like you bust out like a presentation. You know what I mean?
Did I really give you something?
You did, yeah.
I do remember.
Yeah, you brought in. You literally gave me like a brochure and said like, "This is what's going on," and like, but for my like analytical mind, it was like, okay, I got it, and let's continue. How did you get? I
don't think I've ever done that again before. I think
it worked
twice. You and maybe my most recent ex, I did that for at the beginning.
20 minutes, I had the idea, and we were cool. How did you get so comfortable doing that? I imagine it wasn't easy, but how did you get comfortable doing that?
Well, I think part of it is getting comfortable, and part of it is kind of like, oh, here it is. So if you're going to run now. Right, yeah. Screwed over later. So part of that's that strategy, I think. I think part of it too is if I tell you and I see how you react to it, I know what kind of partner you would be to me going through this. Do you know what I mean?
That takes confidence, though, right? That takes confidence to do that, though.
I don't know if it's confidence. I'd say bravery.
Really, to even look at equal footing, because that's a vulnerable ass thing to do. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're opening up your closet. You're naked. You know what I mean? for me,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a 50-50 thing. It was like, here's all the shit that's wrong with me. Please don't leave. You know what I mean? But you went about it pretty confidently.
No, I'm kind of the same way as you, more than you would think. Like, I'll kind of just be like, hey, because it's hard to explain. Like, someone's like, hey, stay over. And I'm like, in my head, like, my medicines are at home. I can't explain that, you know. They know about it, like, hey, you know, or whatever. I need to go to my house. I need to do this, that, and the other. I think I'm honestly kind of chicken in a way because I'm extremely guarded. So I throw that out there and then I put my shield up. You know what I mean? It's like, so it's not all like being this awesome brave person, but like being like, here, this is what it is. And sort of back then, because that was like, what, 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So that was like 10 years.
10,
that felt like more fresh, you know, with me kind of being like, okay, here's what it is. I think I've come to learn, like, people don't react like I really thought they would. Like, most people don't be like, oh my God, this is, you know, whatever. Because most people, like, when they meet me and they've been around me, they're like, what? You know, we don't believe that at all. I've never seen you mad. Because I don't think I don't really get mad. Like, people are extremely surprised when I tell them. So,
do you see it as and I know this is touchy, but do you see it as a superpower in some ways now that you've been able to kind of like learn how to harness it, and knowing that there's always going to be polarity, right? But
right.
But now that you understand it better, and you can kind of like ride the dragon, you know what I mean, and help others or help yourself, is it irresponsible, I guess, in your opinion, to think about it as a strength?
I think it's still kind of like it's my curse and my gift. It's both. Like, I think at the same time, because there's obviously negatives to it, but I also think you kind of have to think this happened for a reason. I got into, you know, working as a school psychologist for a reason, and my thing is if I can help one person understand it, like, then, you know, it was worth me going through it. Like, and it's funny how sometimes that validation comes full circle. I had a student, you know, I told you before we got on that I had taken extra cases at the end of the school year. And so I had, doing this report I have to do for school. You do it every 3 years for students. You do the specialist testing. So 3 years ago, I was helping out at a different building at the end of the school year. And I happened to run into this student who was really having some mental health crises, and the teachers just were not getting it. They were like, oh, she's just, you know, being a brat, she's lazy, like kind of going all these things. And I sat down with her, I sat down with the parents, and I looked at her medical records, and I was like, absolutely not. This young woman, like 4th grade, whatever, this child is going through mental health crisis right now. And so that kind of got the ball rolling. And I talked to the mom, because the mom and the dad was like very harsh on her. And I was like, no, it's mom, it's not your fault. She's trying to express how she's feeling, and she just doesn't have the words or this age to be able to express these things. And that's why you're seeing what you're seeing. So, and she was like, she made her husband come in for another meeting to sit with me to explain it, because it finally made sense to her or whatever. So fast forward to this year, I'm working for a completely different building, picking up a case. I still happen to get that case again. So like, what are the chances that I this student all over again? And I got to have a really good conversation with mom. I ended up calling her after the meeting and saying like, okay, these are some of the things you need to do. And she's like, I'm going to call you and keep you updated with all the things I need to do with her. She was just like, you were the one who started this. She's like, if you wouldn't have started this, we wouldn't be where we are. So that was like really, really cool for it to, like, so that serendipity kind of moment we were talking about before, it kind of came full circle. So that was just nice.
It's like that blind spot, you know what I mean? And it's like that, it's that tribe, you know what I mean? If you haven't had those moments in the shadows, it's hard for you to see someone else when they're in the shadows, you know what I mean? Like for us, we're like, you just, not that we're like have some weird intuition, but like, I feel like once you go through things, you start to realize, you see other behaviors that you have, you know what I mean?
Right.
See people start to pull off in a social situation, like, I do that shit, you know what I mean?
Sometimes it's not even, they hardly do anything. You can like look and it's almost like a sixth sense.
Yeah.
It really is.
Was there any projects you have going on or anything that you want to plug or anything you're passionate about that I guess listeners could check out?
Not really. I mean, I love what I do. I'm going to try to help with, I signed up for NAMI, so the National Alliance on Mental Illness in Cleveland. So I kind of want to do some of that. I just love what I do and want to keep helping. I think encourage everybody to, like, if you've gone through this, being like mentors for kids, I think is a great idea. If it's a way to kind of give back. I kind of do that in my own way through work, but it's something I'd like to kind of, step up a little bit. But no, nothing crazy.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much. Maybe we'll have to get you back on and we'll go over like more of your story. I'm intrigued. You gave me some nuggets along the way that I want to hear more about. So.
All right.
Well, thank you, Brooke.
See ya.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please help raise the vibe by sharing this podcast with friends and family. For more real conversations, show notes, and to connect, head over to lralchemy.com. Until next time, peace.